Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the Amaretti ball python. You may not have heard of the Amaretti. It consists of two genes, the vanilla and the flame. And as a matter of fact, you may not have heard of the flame. A lot of people think the flame is really similar to the fire. Some people think it's the same gene, and some people think there's a difference, kind of like the difference between the butter and the lesser. Really close, but different lines of the same gene. As a matter of fact, there's three genes that are really close: the flame, the fire, and the sulfur, and all of them are compatible. So if you actually breed them together and make a super, or with the two genes of any of those three, you'll actually get an all-white snake with black eyes. They're in the black-eye leucistic complex, and a lot of people think there's differences between them, and if you look at the supers, you can definitely tell there are some differences, especially when you're looking at the super sulfur. But it gets a little bit confusing. Is, for example, if you made a sulfur fire and you bred it to something else, I'd say it's probably almost impossible to tell what the offspring are. It's an allelic complex, so they'd either be sulfur or fire. So you may want to avoid actually breeding the fire, the sulfur, or the flame together. That would be kind of a complicated project. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you the potential of the Amaretti ball python. Alright, so I want to jump over here on Morphmarket.com, and I want to start with the flame. This is what the flame ball python looks like. And when I first looked at the flame, I was like, hey, that looks exactly like a fireball python. If you put the flame next to the fire, I don't think I could pick out the difference. And it definitely looks different than a normal. Usually the flame has kind of more of a creamy color to it, and usually it has more of a jumbled up pattern compared to a normal. Usually you don't really see like the Roswell gray alien head patterns that you'd see on a normal. And as a matter of fact, these aren't very expensive. Actually, look at the price on this one. This one sold for $65, less than $100. It probably cost you more than shipping than this snake is actually selling for. Pretty crazy. And if you take two flames and you breed them together 25% of the time, this is what you get. You get a super flame. Take a look at this beauty. That is a really amazing snake. And the super flames can be really variable. Sometimes they can be completely white with no yellow pattern at all. No pattern, no yellow at the top. Sometimes they're completely white, and sometimes they'll have like faint yellow spots on them, and sometimes it's a really bright yellow with a high definition. It's pretty amazing how variable the super flames can be. And the interesting thing I found about the super flame is take a look at the price on the super flame. This one actually sold for $600, which is pretty amazing. You take two snakes that aren't really that expensive, breed them together, and you make a really visually stunning super. And I think it's bringing a higher price because it's really rare. There's almost, I'd say right now, there's really not a super flame over on Morphmarket that you can buy. So you could probably get $600 for a snake like this. And if you actually compare the super flame to the super fire, take a look at this. This is the super fire. It almost looks exactly the same as the super flame. It's an all-white snake with black eyes, and it has the same, almost the same amount of pattern coming right down the top of the snake. And if you actually compare this one as far as the price on this one is only $300, because there's a lot more super fires. Fire is a lot more popular, probably the most popular between the flame and the sulfur and the fire. Almost a lot of people have a lot of fires out there, and the popularity is there's more of them, so there's a lot of people kind of competing for the same market with the supers, which kind of drives the prices down, which I find is kind of interesting. And if you actually compare this one to the super sulfur, take a look at this. This is the super sulfur. Looks almost exactly the same, but I found there are definitely differences in the sulfur compared to the fire, especially in the supers. And most of the super sulfurs seem to have a lot more contrast and a lot of higher definition. And I actually pulled up one more super sulfur. Take a look at this one. This is this is a crazy looking super sulfur. And let me tell you, you'll never see this much yellow and this high of a contrast in the flames or the fires when you're talking about the supers. It's kind of crazy. If you look at the price on this one was about $350. So it's, it's not really as expensive as the super flames, which are really rare. So if you actually take the flame and you breed it with a vanilla, getting back to the Amaretti, this is actually what you get. You get the Amaretti. This is what an Amaretti looks like. Really impressive combination. It's kind of interesting how this allelic complex completely changes when you mix it with vanilla. And the flame is also allelic with disco, same with the fire and the sulfur. And I kind of want to show you some versions of the Amaretti using the fire and the sulfur. You can actually make the same thing. Take a look at this. This is the fire version. You probably have heard of this. This is actually the vanilla cream, which is the fire and the vanilla. So the Amaretti is essentially the flame version of the vanilla cream. Pretty awesome. If you actually take a look at this snake and compare it to the other one, it looks almost exactly the same with the same color and the same pattern. As a matter of fact, I pulled up one more here. This is the sulfur version of the vanilla cream, or the sulfur version of the Amaretti. Take a look at this. Looks almost exactly the same. So this is the sulfur and the vanilla. It's kind of interesting how you kind of compare all three of these jeans when you're talking about the Amaretti, the vanilla cream, or the sulfur cream. So I actually came over here at Morphmarket.com and I thought, you know, I'm just going to see how many just the flame combos are over here. And I think there's like almost 9,000 ball pythons for sale over here at Morphmarket right now, which is a really low number. We're kind of right between the seasons where everyone's pretty much sold everything from the winter and everybody's waiting on the new hatchlings to come out. So this is like an all-time low. Usually there's like, you know, 15,000 snakes for sale over here. And to my surprise, there was only 3 combos that actually had the flame in it, which is pretty surprising. As a matter of fact, one of them, this one at the end here, this is a leopard ivory possible flame. So we don't even know if flame's in this one, so really there's only 2 flame combos over here on Morphmarket, and that is how rare it is. And let me tell you, if you're thinking about buying an Amaretti right now, you probably couldn't get one, especially over here on Morphmarket, unless you knew someone who is actually selling one. Unless you made your own. You could get like a pastel flame and then breed it to a vanilla or a super vanilla or something like that and make your own Amaretti. So I kind of wanted to show you the potential of the Amaretti when mixing other genes into the combination. And let me tell you, I was kind of struggling here because there's not a lot of combinations that have ever been made with the flame and the vanilla combination. But the pinstripe is one that was really an interesting combination. This is one of my favorite genes, just a standalone gene, and it's probably the brightest gold gene in all of ball pythons. And let me tell you, if you actually have a hatchling ball python that's a pinstripe in your hand, it just glows bright gold. It is pretty amazing. And here's what happens if you work pinstripe into the Amaretti. Take a look at this one. This is a really interesting combination. Essentially what it does is it almost gives you 3 stripes right down the top of the back of the snake, and it kind of wipes out all the pattern on the side. It's the only one I've ever seen, and this one is actually the world's first. And let me tell you, when you're working with flames and Amarettis, you could almost always get a world's first. If you go for the world's first, this would be a fantastic project to jump into, because not a lot of people are actually working with the flame or the Amaretti combos. So here is the Pastel. The Pastel does have quite a bit of an influence when you work it into the Amaretti. The Pastel is a yellow snake, and a lot of times they can be really super bright yellow, and sometimes they can be kind of browned out. And I'd say this is probably one of the brightest pastels that I have seen, a really amazing example of the Pastel. And here's what happens if you mix Pastel in with the Amaretti. Take a look at this. This is a really amazing combination. And I actually look at this and I'm thinking, this would be a great starting point for adding other genes like Desert Ghost and stuff like that, stuff that has probably never been attempted with this combination. It's probably been attempted with the fire version or the sulfur version of the combination. You can kind of get an idea of what's been made with those versions of the same gene. But if you're looking for some world's first, you could probably work some stuff in like that. It's pretty amazing how it brings out a lot of the yellow, and you can definitely see a lot of the blacks coming in from the Pastel. Pretty amazing combination. So here is the lesser. The lesser is actually in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, so it's a little bit more difficult to work with the lesser, because if you breed it to anything else in the blue-eyed leucistic, like the bamboo, the Russo, the Mojave, the Mystic, the Phantom, the Special, any of those, you'll end up with an all-white snake with blue eyes. So it's kind of a double whammy working it into the Amaretti, because you'll have a gene in the blue-eyed leucistic, and then you'll have a gene in the black-eyed leucistic. So if you breed it to something else, like the fire, the flame, flame or the sulfur, you'll actually end up with an all-white snake with black eyes. So you're kind of limited on what you can actually breed it. But if you actually mix the lesser in with the Amaretti, this is what you get. Take a look at this. This is almost exactly like an Amaretti. Not much change at all, but you can definitely see a change in pattern compared to the Amaretti. As a matter of fact, we could probably go back to the Amaretti over here, and this is kind of what it looks like. It looks like the pattern is almost inverted when you look at adding the lesser. You kind of have these almost saddles of black up on top, and when you actually add the lesser to it, let's see, let's go back here to the lesser, and it kind of changes it a little bit. You get a little bit of a stripe on the top, and it kind of reduces the saddles. It's almost the same as the Amaretti. You can't really tell that much. I think if you actually had the snakes side by side, you could probably pick out the lesser, but not that much of an influence. So here is the spider. The spider is probably one of the most visually dominant standalone morphs. Really visually stunning comet, just a single gene. And a lot of people ask me, what's in the spider? And believe it or not, the spider is just one gene. You breed it to something else and you get 50% spiders. And the cool thing I like about the spider is the spider web pattern right down the top. And they always have these really cool head stamps. Pretty awesome. And here's what happens if you work the spider into the Amaretti. Take a look at this. This is the only example I could find, and essentially what it does is it really reduces the spider. Almost looks like a spider Enchi combo or something like that, except you almost have this clear line, like a clear spot right down the top of the back, with the spider almost acting like leopard stripes or tiger stripes right down the side of the snake. I can't say I've ever seen a spider combination quite like it. And you can definitely see kind of the mixed up head pattern, the head stamp on this combination. Pretty awesome. And that one more I kind of wanted to show you here. This is a combination of the Amaretti and the Leopard. The Leopard makes some really amazing combos, and the Leopard really brings out a lot of dark in combos, especially if you're kind of on the edge like the Amaretti, where you get a little bit of dark, but it's not really intense, like a really intense dark. The Leopard is the way to go, because if you mix it in with genes that are kind of on the edge, it'll take those darks and really darken them like an almost jet black, almost like an ink black. You can definitely see a lot of that in the Leopard, and usually the Leopard really jumbles up the pattern in a lot of combinations. And here's what happens if you work the Leopard into the Amaretti. Take a look at this. This is probably one of my favorite combos. Working the Leopard into the vanilla and the flame makes for a really impressive combination. It's kind of amazing how clear the head is on this, and you kind of get this almost like a three stripe, the black and the yellow stripes coming right down the neck, and then it just kind of jumbles it up. And you can almost always tell the vanilla and the flame. A lot of times it has kind of a clear back to it, which is kind of an interesting effect. And you can definitely see the striping on the side from the Leopard. Makes for a really impressive combination. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Perkelly asks, if you buy a snake, can the previous owner do the quarantine for you? And that is a very good question. Essentially, the whole reason for quarantine is because you really don't trust the previous owner, or you don't know the history of the snake. So for example, if you walk into a pet store, you don't know where that snake has been and how many owners it's recently been through. You know, a lot of times if an owner sells it to someone else and then they sell it to the pet store and they sell it, you know, kind of keep flipping the snake, a lot of times it can really be exposed to a lot of potential pathogens. And really the ones you're really looking for is mites. I would say the mites are probably the #1 problem, and respiratory infections is probably #2. But as a matter of fact, if you actually know that, you know, if you buy the snake from someone and that is their only snake, I've actually done this before. You know, I buy a snake from someone who's only ever had one snake, and that snake, you know, I actually look at it and doesn't have a respiratory infection. I know they haven't been around other snakes, so I know there's no mites on that snake. And I've actually taken that snake and put it directly here in my collection. It's probably a pretty low risk. As a matter of fact, if you know a breeder that is pretty safe, you know, you can actually buy one of my snakes, and trust me, there's nothing going on with my snakes. I've never had a respiratory infection in any of my ball pythons, and I haven't been to any shows lately, and I haven't bought any snakes. So, you know, if you buy a snake from me right now, you could probably put it right in your collection. But it comes down to trust and really the operation of kind of what's going going on with the breeder. Some breeders will actually flip snakes a lot. I've seen a lot of people, well, they'll buy like hundreds of ball pythons and kind of buy them in bulk at a discount and then increase the price and then turn around and sell them for a profit. And a lot of times people that are flipping a lot of snakes like that, it can be really risky actually buying a snake from them, because a lot of times they can constantly be fighting respiratory infections and mites as the snakes kind of come in and leave the shop. So it really depends on your level of trust and kind of the knowledge around kind of the background of the breeder or the person who has the snake, and kind of the history from when the snake was sold all the way to where the snake is in your possession. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. All right, so take a look at this. My first Muscovy duck fresh out of the incubator, day 0. So cute. Look at that little head. Oh, so cute.